I'm Corbin Goodwin, postmodern hot rodder of sorts, if that's not too pretentious a title. Engineering student, captain of the CSUN Formula SAE team. I have a pretty broad interest in mechanical devices, and I don't really know a lot about them, except for cars, but I know like way too much about cars. I like driving them, I like building them. Kind of a weird dude, a lot of people don't like me, and a lot of people do, and I'm having a great time.
A lot of people don't like you?
Yeah.
Why is
not
that?
a lot of people, but you know.
Who doesn't like you?
You
have a car named the Rolls-Royce. I'm assuming
yes.
that, well, you had a car,
named
the Rolls-Royce. I'm assuming the trolls don't like you very much?
Yeah. I mean, it turns out when you cut holes in British luxury automobiles, people don't like that.
People don't like a lot of things. I wouldn't take that to heart if I were you.
You know what's funny is the SVO got a lot more hate than the Rolls.
Which one was the SVO?
That was the Corbin's hit show. Can we curse on here?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I mean, not that I plan to, but anyway. Yeah, so the Corbin shit show, SVO, oh my God, you should have
Mustang?
You should have seen.
Oh, the Turbo Mustang.
Oh, you should have seen those Facebook forums,
the one
man.
that's pulled up right now on my quasi-television screen.
Yeah, you should have. Oh, that was a bad look.
It's an SVO Mustang.
Well, they weren't trolls, right? They just saw that I had desecrated their like child. So this was on the Turbo Ford forums, right? Keep in mind the SVOs are actually pretty limited production. They never made that. I want to say it's in the few thousand, but not even that, like under 5,000 SVOs ever.
Great. It's still a piece of shit. Continue.
I mean, yeah, so no, right. This is the thing is that, and you saw this within the forum. It's amazing. Like anywhere I go, weird shit starts happening. You saw there was a group of people who were saying, oh my God, how could you do this to this car? I was trying to explain, like, look, it was $1,500. It's been on Craigslist for like 3 months. Any of you could have saved this at any point if you had actually wanted to save it.
Right.
But they're like, oh, we can't believe you modified it and destroyed it. That hood was good. I'm like, no, the hood blew back and was bent in like an accident before I bought the car. And so everyone else and the other people were like, no, this is a pile of junk. Like, who cares what he does to it? It's just cool. Like, it's an SVO. And then, yeah, so there were a lot of people who, I mean, I got the classic, like, oh, you should never touch cars again, or you're the worst thing that happened to cars, or like, so on. People get creative. The Australians hated the Rolls-Royce. I saw a forum in Australia. You think they'd love it too. It's like Mad Max over there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's people who don't like what I do.
Well, welcome to the internet.
Yeah. I mean, right. It's a public audience.
Right. Do they pay you to do this?
No, they sure don't.
So fuck them.
Yeah. That's the sentiment.
Yeah.
I mean, the only haters that actually counted were the Jay Leno's Garage editors.
You got the attention of the Jay Leno's Garage editors?
Well,
and they trolled on you?
I mean, hold up. No, this is inferred, but if you watch, so I was obviously there at the filming of the Rolls-Royce for Jay Leno, but if you watch the segment they put on the show, they cut out almost all of it. And what's very, very apparent is that they had to cut most of it because they were terrified because most of the car is like this really weird, like political statement piece, and they didn't really art thing, and they didn't. I don't think had any idea what to do with it, and I think they were just freaked out. They're like, we don't want to show "God Save the EU" on national television for more than like a split second.
That makes sense. That makes a little bit more sense. Yeah, it's a very clean show, Jay Leno's Garage.
Yeah, of course. I mean, they're trying to stay apolitical, so I mean, I get why, but I mean, that was the haters that counted. They were not they were not hating from a place of personal prejudice. They were hating from a place of wanting to keep their jobs. I understand that, you know?
Yeah, it does actually feel kind of good when you get edited.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was like, that's right. Like, you should have put this on the internet and you didn't. Right. But I mean, that's being mean to, I don't know, the producer who got me in touch, and I love him, and that's great. And I love being on that show, and it was really cool. But
I don't think you mean any disrespect, and neither do I, but I think it's good when you make a political statement, regardless of what kind of statement you make.
Right, yeah. And it wasn't supposed to be a colored one. I wasn't supposed to have like a specific message. I mean, it kind of did. I had my interpretation, but it wasn't supposed to be artist intent is like flawed, inherently. So
we'll get to that car. We're going to get to all of your cars. I don't know you. I can't say this with love, but this does come from a good place. You're a weird guy, and that's great.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. I'm sure someone aside from me has told you that.
I mean, some people haven't told me that,
Okay, so there's less people that haven't told you that?
You catch my drift.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, certainly. I would take that as a accurate descriptor.
There's different types of weird. There's creepy weird, and then there's fun weird. There's people that just don't care and just do whatever it is that they want to do because they're having a blast doing it.
Yeah.
And you seem to be the latter.
Yeah, thank you. I think I kind of transitioned from the former to the latter. Sometimes I ride the line, I'm sure, but yeah, certainly.
Okay. Puberty hits us in very different ways.
It really does. I mean, there's been such a massive ideological shift that, I don't know if I would be able to. I mean, I'd be able to talk to the old me. We'd share some things, but I'd be like, listen, man, you got some ideas that are like a little unsavory, my dude. So,
I think all of us go through that type of growing up.
As we do.
Sure.
So, but yeah, definitely weird.
Let's start from the very, very beginning.
Ooh.
You're a young guy. You're what, 30?
No, I'm 27.
27.
I feel old.
You're my brother's age.
Yeah.
Did the craziness start around high school, or what's going on here? Let's talk about the philosophy of Mr. Corbin Goodwin.
So there's a quote from Pablo Picasso, right? Something to the effect of, when he was 11, he said, it doesn't matter what I do, I'll be the Pablo Picasso of that thing, right?
Okay.
And this is going to get real. This is going to start veering real close to like self-aggrandizing, like, oh, bro, I'm so fucking cool. And that's not really what it is, but I feel like I could have gone a lot of directions. And I feel like a lot of probably would have done something interesting and kind of weird in any of those fields. Not necessarily like in the public eye. I think that was sort of accidental. I don't know. It's strange how these things interact with each other. But basically, I was in middle school and I was into science as a large, broad category. And at some point I'm like, I need a hobby that's going to take me a while to like learn all of. Because, in middle school, I was just like, you just learn all of it. You just pick the thing and like whatever, you spend a year or two and that's it. You just know that thing.
Right. That's exactly how it works.
Of course. So I don't know. My dad kind of liked cars. I'm like, that's impressive how he can like name cars. I'm like, cars are kind of cool. I'll just do cars.
Okay.
And I kind of got into it more and more, fell down the hole as we all do. And I drove a bunch, cycled. My parents were like, here's money for your first car. And I just cycled that through a bunch of cars, was up in the canyons all the time. I never really went to parties in high school. I was just driving some more. And if we fast forward, basically, so I just kept doing that, going through cars, whatever. I finally, let me think about this. Yeah, okay. So I had put together a 1986 911 with my dad. We found a shell, put a motor in it, reassembled it more or less. It wasn't that broken, and I was driving that a bunch at the time. And then I broke up with arguably my first girlfriend. I don't know. Okay. Some girl I was involved with in some way, shape, or another. That's a whole nother podcast. Yeah. And so I was like, emotionally distressed. It was not a good time. And I went driving and I went way out to Mulhole and way past Canaan. And I was really sad on the way back listening to Desolation Row, I think, Bob Dylan. What's the really long track that's sad? I'm pretty sure that's the track.
This is turning out to be like a teen movie.
Yeah, so no, I was listening to that. Well, no, here's the thing. So those old 911s, they mask their speed incredibly well. They are very fast cars and they do not seem like it. If you look at the speedo, you're like, we're going fast. This is a fast car. Like around corners and just in general, it just carries speed. Anyway, and I'm going back. I'm not paying attention. I lose it into a tree and I wreck the car and I bend the steering wheel with my head. And this is the start of the RX-7 because I think, well, what am I going to do in the canyons now? Like my dad's pissed off. Don't have a lot of money to work with. And I'm like, those Daytona coupes are really cool. The kit car, factory 5 kit cars.
Yeah.
I'm like, how do you do one of those without buying one? And I'm like, okay, you just find something that's like wedge shaped. And then you need like a V8. And I'm like, RX-7, that's wedge shaped in a coupe. V8, Ford V8. They're supposed to have Ford V8s. That's what the Daytona coupe had. So that's how that started.
Okay.
That's like the really condensed version of how I got to the point of making that car, which then sent me into this whole other like path.
RX-7, Daytona coupe, not really in the same sentence.
No, not usually. But if you think about the fundamentals of what makes a thing, they're actually not too dissimilar.
They're not.
No.
I mean, but that would put every single car in that category.
Well, hold up now. I mean, any wedge-shaped rear-wheel drive, like solid axle, V8 fittable car, which isn't all of them.
Okay, a good amount of them.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a few in that category.
Sure.
I mean, like a 240 is too long and like floppity. A 240 SX, a 240Z is a little too fragile. Although a 240Z would have arguably been just as good a candidate.
What do you mean fragile?
Too fragile, man. They're just, IRS and the fucking, they're just made out of like tin, bro. They're tin cans.
Okay. The RX-7 didn't have an independent rear?
No, it's a solid axle. And it can take a lot of power. Actually, I shouldn't misspeak because people are going to send me like hate mail, be like, oh, you know, the 240Z has the R180 diff, it can handle 400 horsepower. Anyway, no, basically the 240Zs also have drums in the rear, not discs. And they're more expensive. And I swear to you, the chassis is not as stiff as a first-gen RX-7, which is not that stiff anyway.
Sure.
But 240Zs just feel like tin cans to me. I think they're great cars. I just think if you're going to shove like 400 horses in one, you need to do more work. And at the time, I couldn't weld.
Okay.
So I don't know. And I was like, well, I can either spend no money and get something that's going to be a little closer to what I want at the final product. So that's why the RX-7 versus 240Z.
Fair enough.
And what else are you going to use? A Mustang? Like, that's not a...
Yeah.
You know? I mean, those are cool. In retrospect, I guess that would have worked too. But
are you trying to appease the people that were shaming you about the SVO at this point?
No, they can go fuck themselves. I'm not here to appease people.
Fair enough.
I know what I'm doing.
Wasn't there a story that the car was in a ditch or something?
Yeah, I mean, I drove up to Fresno to get it, and it was pretty much in a ditch. I think basically it was probably some really old guy who was probably like expiring, and he said to some person he knew, he's like, oh, can you sell that car for me? I'm never going to drive it. It's in a ditch. Like, why am I holding on to this thing?
Okay.
So I drove up with the trailer, and we rolled onto the trailer and took it back down. So.
Okay. Ditch, not necessarily the best start, but walk me through the condition of the car when you went to go pick it up.
Yeah, it was pretty heinous. The interior was pretty rat chewed everywhere. There's like rat poop just like an inch deep in the pan. Not literally, but there's a lot, you know, spider webs everywhere. Weeds have grown into every like orifice on the car.
Okay. So it's been there a minute.
Yeah. I mean, the reg was from 94 and this was 2011 or something. So
how old were you at this point?
19.
So at 19, you're picking up an RX-7. You're influenced by a Daytona coupe.
Yeah.
And that's what you want to do. You want to make yourself a Daytona coupe. What about the Daytona coupe inspired you to build this car?
Oh, gosh. I think it's strange. It's almost coming back full circle now. I had this weird, like a period where I'm like, oh no, I don't care about power anymore. And after buying my Honda Beat that I just recently bought, I'm like, I kind of just want like a Corvette, which like me 5 years ago would have been like, are you shitting me? Like, you want a Corvette? Yeah, but at the time, it's hard to tell how much of this was like escapist fantasy, but kind of I had this idea where I'm like, oh yeah, just like, I'm just going to have like V8 power. Wait, what was I in college? I have to like put myself in, where the hell was I? Yeah, I think I was watching, oh God, how like personal do we get with this? I think I was watching a lot of my friends graduate at that point, or at least I'm like, I don't want to say I was like resigned to myself as a fuck up, but I'm like, I'm not applying myself enough. I can see my trajectory right now in school and it's not pointing where it's supposed to be pointing.
Sure.
So I think there was definitely a part of me, and it's come back many times in many ways over the years. Like in San Jose, I ended up buying like 36 film cameras, and like I used them all, don't get me wrong, but that was like a symptom.
36.
Yeah, a symptom of
film cameras.
Yeah, they're all great too. I fucking love those things.
And you use them all.
Yeah, I mean at one point or another. Okay. I sold them too. I didn't literally just stockpile them and like hold them in my. I did have a whole desk covered. My friend just sent me an image of that. The friend who I made the Genomino with, but we were like way off track. Anyway.
Yeah.
And I think so. Part of this was just like this. That was my current like fantasy car at the time. I'm just like, yeah, I'll have this V8 power, and this is, I just want to feel torque and go and like be a hooligan and cruise the canyons and like engage in this like romantic ideal of canyon driving and operation of a motor vehicle. I was just so like in love with this romantic ideal at the time.
Okay.
I think that was just the perfect like vehicle, no pun intended, for it.
The Daytona coupe.
Yeah.
Which you have never driven in a canyon before.
Absolutely not. Nothing even, well, I had a Cobra Mustang. I guess that's remotely similar, but.
So let's go back to after that Carrera or after that 911. Was that was the car that you drove in high school, or?
Gosh, I think I did have that in high school, right at the tail end of it. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, in high school, my first car was an FD. I mean, gosh, I don't even remember all of them now. It was like an FD. There was an Evo, RX-8, BMW 2002, E36 M3. Oh, funny story about well, we'll leave that. I was going to go on forever. But the E36, turns out like the guy sold it to. I bought a friend of his car like many years later without like completely randomly up in the Bay too. Like not locally.
Small world.
Very strange. Yeah, I had a bunch of random things. MR2 Spider, one of my favorite canyon cars ever. Miata for 4 days. Oh my gosh.
4 days.
Yeah, for 4 days.
Well, let's talk about the 4 days. What happened?
Yeah, so funny story about that. I don't remember what I sold. Oh, so I had the RX-8, and then I was like, man, I need power. I want torque, right? And it's funny because I love RX-8s now. I'm like, they don't need any more power. And I like preach to people that, you know, you're silly for wanting more. At the time, I was just thinking, oh yeah, like if only this had a V8 or torque or something. And I'm like, you know what I'll do? I'll build them those monster Miatas because those things seem so cool. And then so I get a Miata, and my parents were like, no. And I'm just, oh, okay.
About the Miata in general, or no, you can't do that?
Miata. Yeah, okay. They're just like, no, it's not happening. And so I sold that and got a Cobra Mustang. I had it for 4 days. It was a friend of mine's dad's who lives down in Woodland Hills. So I just gave it back. I'm like, sorry for the inconvenience.
Fair enough. Now, this is before or after the build started?
This is before everything. This is still like pre 9/11.
Okay, so you haven't touched any cars in terms of modification yet?
Not really. Well, someone you may know, Jackson Faber.
Do not know.
Okay, your brother probably knows him. In high school, he gave me an 81 Mercury Colony Park wagon. Amazing, with a 302 or maybe 351. Beautiful shape, like truly beautiful. And I drove that a bunch. That was actually right after my Evo. I remember that now. And I cut a giant Targa panel into the roof. I measured the roof and I made it. And I put these wood planks and ceiling foam so that you could unbolt the roof panel, put it in the wagon of the trunk of the wagon, and then you just had this massive hole in the top of the car, and it's body on frame, so it doesn't matter. It's not any less rigid than it was, really. And so, I was driving this Targa paneled 81 Mercury wagon. It was, oh man, that thing was an absolute hoot. I think I cut the pipes off it too, and it made it a little too loud, but whatever.
It's okay.
It's a nice sounding V8. It's cool.
Yeah.
So that was, if we're honest, that was like the proto Corbin hack, like the, like I'm just going to cut holes in shit with a Sawzall and it's going to work.
This is getting weird in a very good way. My head is spinning from the amount of cars that you just named before you even touched any cars.
Yeah, it was a lot. I remember when I had my FD, gosh, I'm like, oh, I don't work on cars. What is this? Like, that's scary. I don't know what to do. I wasn't like scared. I'm just like, I don't know what this is. Like, I don't want to fuck with it. I don't want to break it.
Sure. So when did you get the balls to start hacking cars up?
It was sometime building the RX-7. I don't even remember how it started happening. It was just kind of a, I don't remember what the first thing I did that was to like hack that car. I just remember like, I'm like, I have to build this. Like, how am I going to build it? And it sort of started taking on a life of its own. It's like, and I really hate comparing myself to an artist because I feel like that's like, so we're like just like pointing right towards like pretense zone. I'm like going deep. But yeah, it kind of like took on a life of its own. As I started doing things, it started kind of feeding back, and I'm like, oh, like this is cool. This is hot. Like as it felt very natural too. It's with the Rolls, I think it was much more conscious, and you can see it in the car.
Sure.
With the Jetta and with the RX-7, it was more natural. Like I'm just like, hey, dash panel. Okay, I'll go to Apex. Hey, this is cool. This wood reminds me of like a 70s muscle car. That's really neat. Like I'm just gonna take this. I'm like, where can I stick it? Oh, it's only this dimension. Oh, if I stick it vertically, I can put gauges vertically. That's just like a Viper. That's cool. So I guess I started arranging things, I just found aesthetically interesting items, and I found that they would fit in ways that were also aesthetically interesting and reference something. It's always referencing things. The Jettamino was a reference to the V-dub scene at the time. It was making fun of the scene, which makes fun of itself. It wasn't supposed to be like an actual jab, but it's like, look, V-dub people just do weird shit, like, and they don't care. They're just out there doing their weird shit. So we're gonna do some weird shit too, in like, as I said, some kind of satire.
Satire is a good word for that. I don't think hack. I don't like to use the word hack.
Yeah, I don't feel like I do hack work. I mean, it's hacked up. I cut holes and shit.
But even hacked up, I don't necessarily see that as the right word to use.
Right. I guess just for lack of a better word.
Hacked up, you can hack it up and throw it away, but you're not throwing it away.
No.
In some ways, it's kind of romantic. You're taking these cars and you're bringing them back to life.
Yeah, I mean, that was giving something new life. And I think it's interesting having my builds having been commented on by Matt Farah like twice with the Jettamino there, because he did point that out. He's like, yeah, this car was like just literally a heap, and he kind of gave it this other life. And that is very true. Yeah. I think he missed the mark with the Jettamino because he thought it made it worse, but it really made it better. The Jettamino could be the best car I've built so far.
Well, I think he was a little scared.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to set the record straight on that, I told him don't drive it in the canyons with the setup. This is an autocross setup. We specifically did that stagger so that you could take it to a cone course and it might rotate pretty nicely. Like you could chuck it. And then what did he do? He
took it into a canyon.
Did the canyons. So,
right.
I mean, I'm not like mad at him. It's Matt. He can do whatever he wants. He's Matt Farah. But,
sure.
You know, to take it up the canyons after I explicitly said not to, and then be like, oh, this car's scary, bro. It oversteers. Like, yeah, it does.
That's what it was designed to do.
Yep.
Right.
I wanted to do that at like 20 miles an hour around a cone so that you could like go fast. But
20 miles an hour. And going up to, let's say, 40,
Yeah.
double the miles an hour?
Yeah.
That could get a little sketchy.
Yeah, and then there's like cliffs and stuff. I mean, if you watch him drive it, it looked almost beautiful. I mean, the way it pirouetted around some of those turns, like it did not look out of control to me. You know?
Four-wheel steer-esque.
Yeah.
If you don't mind me saying.
Yeah, no. It had a very nice balance to it, kind of accidentally at the time, you know. But
I don't know. I didn't drive it. I'm not going to say that maybe balance was the word that I was looking for.
Yeah, right. I mean, I guess not balanced, but it wasn't out of control feeling. I'll say that.
Sure.
I drove it plenty. Like it didn't, you know, people are like, oh, it's like, must be like ice skates in the rear. It's like, no, it's not that bad. But I digress.
Look, before any track day, before any autocross day, you have to set the car up.
I mean, if you want to go fast, there was a square setup we could have run on that car. We could have just put the E30 bottle caps front rear.
Okay.
Just calms it down and makes it handle like your average Jetta minus whatever, a few 100 pounds.
Fair enough. That works. Listen, I'm not going to argue your design philosophy.
So Matt Farah is commenting. He's saying like, oh, you made the RX-7 better and made the Jetta Mino worse. I said, I definitely think he has an interesting point with both of those. I think he just didn't know. I think it was just unfair when he said that to the Jetta because it was the wrong setup.
Maybe he just didn't get the point.
Yeah.
Sometimes people don't get the point, and that's what happens.
Absolutely. I mean, the point of that car was to be the most whimsical and the most utilitarian car at the same time, and it did do that.
Wasn't it a pizza delivery car? Or something like that? Your friend used it for some kind of delivery?
Yeah, we met at that pizza place, and he definitely used it for pizza before we did that. I don't know if he used it for pizza. I think he did while we still... I don't remember the timeline on that, but yeah, he definitely used it for pizza for a while.
That's pretty insane. That would be an interesting car to open the door to. I wouldn't even pay attention to the pizza delivery guy or the pizza if I saw that in the background.
Yeah,
like, what the hell
like, what
are you on right now?
Use that, man.
What did you do to my pizza? You start with the RX-7. You got the car out of the ditch. You start working on it.
Yeah.
And then you gave it a title. Was the title upon completion, or did you give it the title before you even started working on the car?
I didn't give it a title. I don't really title my cars.
So the zero fucks given RX-7 was that Jalopnik?
That was all Matt.
That was Matt.
That was Matt Farah, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, genius for doing it. I would not have titled my car because, once again, I'm afraid of being like, oh yeah, bro, I'm a cool hot rod guy. I give my cars like, they're masterworks and I title them. I mean, the Ring Brothers can do that because they do like amazing work.
Yeah, they're the Ring Brothers.
Yeah, they're the Ring Brothers. They can do whatever they want. They can be like, this is Magic Dragon. I'd be like, hell yeah, it's a Magic Dragon. Look at that thing.
Right.
No, yeah, that was just Matt Farah. He wanted to give it a catchy I think it works pretty well. Yeah.
It does. It works very well.
Yeah.
I'll give Matt credit where credit is due.
Absolutely. The man has some knowledge.
Sure.
Has some thoughts.
So I'm trying to put two and two together. I'm trying to kind of dig deep and understand why the hell did you do what you did, and why didn't you stop at, let's say, point whatever?
Right. I mean, the funny thing about that car is technically I did stop. I never finished it. I mean, my original plan, and it's funny, the not finishing it is what gave it a lot of its aesthetic and real like weirdness. I originally was going to put the flares on the fenders.
Okay.
Never did. And the wheels the slight poke of the wheels seems like kind of an iconic trait of that car. If you think about it, if those wheels had not poked out a little bit, it would have lost something visually.
Yeah, it would have been just kind of a JDM lookalike.
Yeah, it would have been like, oh, it's a Pro Touring.
Sure.
I don't even remember if Pro Touring was a thing back in the day, but this was like an inverse Pro Touring, right? It was like a Japanese car with like America. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't know. The title both serves it and doesn't. It serves it in that the aesthetic, yes, aesthetically, you look at it and you're like, wow. And that it's kind of, I mean, not to give myself credit or anything, but it's kind of like the same way that a modernist, like a Pollock is a fucking masterwork or something. Or I'm trying to remember some of the other artists. I don't know much about the fucking expression paintings, or whatever they're called. But, you know, they look very just like haphazard, right? You're like, oh, you just like slap some stuff on a page.
Sure.
But I mean, a lot of times these guys took a long time and really like stared at the composition and came back and really built something up over time that looks like it was like just splatted on a page in like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, zero fucks given. Sure. Yeah, it does. Like if you walk into that car and look at it, you're like, oh wow, like this guy built this in a weekend, you know, and with a drill. I mean, it was like years of the drill, but it was just with the drill. But yeah, but there was a lot of thought put into everything. It necessarily did because I was working extremely limited budget, extremely limited tools, and all I had was like, how am I going to do X thing without spending money and without spending time? I mean, in the end, I did spend money because I don't have the resources that a lot of these guys, like, if you know Sloppy Mechanics, there's these guys on the East Coast who build like 9-second turbo shit boxes with junkyard LSs, and they do it for like literally no money. They're amazing what they do. I think a lot of them have a lot more resource than I do. Because I was looking at myself for a while and I'm like, oh my God, I spent all this money and these guys, like, they can build these fast cars for no money. What the hell? Like, where did I go wrong? But again, it's just, I had a garage, my parents' garage and a driveway, and I was, did not know all the things I know now. But anyway, yeah, so on one sense, sure, no fucks given. Aesthetically, yeah, it looks like that. But there was a lot of thought in that car. There was a lot. So I think it bothered me at the time. I recall being kind of like, hey, Matt, that's not right. I really cared about that car. But I've embraced it in the latter years. Like, if someone wants to engage with me about like the philosophy of building a hot rod, I'm down. If they want to take that and be like, oh, look, this guy doesn't give a fuck and he uses a hole saw. I'm like, all right, sure, dude. Like, perception is reality, man.
Right.
Like,
yeah, give them what they want.
Yeah, do you.
How did your family feel about you taking a car that you found on Craigslist and then tearing it apart and making it into this creation? What was the reaction from them first? Because I'm assuming that they were probably the first ones to have a reaction. Yeah,
they didn't like it at any point. My mom just like every week pretty much was like, hey, don't do it, sell it. And I'm like, okay, thanks, Mom. And then the next week was like, hey, this is a bad idea financially and in every other sense, like, sell it. Right. And I'm like, okay, no, that would be even worse. I'm like, at least if I complete it, I'll get my like $2,000 out of it, whatever. I'll put it on Craigslist for peanuts and like get my peanuts back, as opposed to selling it for nothing.
Okay.
So, yeah, they hated it the whole way. Then when we did the Rolls, they hated that. Then when they did the Jettamino, that wasn't my car, so they hated it when they saw it. But luckily, they didn't have to see it as much, so they didn't like that. Yeah, the SVO, they really didn't like either, obviously. So, I mean, there's a common theme here emerging.
Well, they didn't like it because it was unsafe, because you were spending too much time on these cars, because they were ugly. What
time and money? Yeah, I mean, for them, they didn't see value in what I was doing at all, really. It's just weird because afterward, I'm like, hey, look, I got front page Reddit for like this thing I did. And they're like, oh, I mean, not that they would necessarily understand that, but,
sure.
Even if I explain like, hey, look, that's kind of cool. Like, hey, look at this thing, look at that thing. And I mean, it's been a long, long saga of really cool like opportunities that have, come and gone and whatever, and like all these neat things that have happened, but that's beyond their scope of understanding for like something interesting and valuable.
Fair enough.
They have their worldview, and it is what it is.
It sounded like you were influenced to do it for yourself.
Yes.
And then you caught some media attention.
Yes.
Did you continue to do it for yourself, or did that kind of influence you to do some things that would ruffle some feathers? A la the Rolls-Royce. Who named that car, by the way?
I have no idea. I mean, don't get me wrong. If someone says something to me like, hey, it's the Rolls-Royce, like,
kind of run with it.
When someone says like, oh, what's it called? I'm like, oh, I don't know. Someone call it this, someone call it that. Like, pick whatever you want. Like, your interpretation is just fine.
Sure.
Yeah. And it's interesting. So yeah, on that question, the media attention, it did change what I was doing, but not, I could never develop a taste for building something just to screw with people. Not really. I mean, every once in a while I have that impulse, but I tend not to want to bother people.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm not really big on that.
When you build something like that,
yeah,
it's going to bring in attention. And that attention is going to cause some kind of, I don't know, maybe animosity?
Yeah, it's unavoidable. I mean, it really just is.
And not necessarily because the car is poorly done.
No, right.
Maybe because you're doing it for the attention. Because especially right now, everybody wants to be in journalism. Everybody wants to do something on YouTube. Everybody wants to do something as like on a podcast.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't do it for the right reasons.
Right.
And I guess what I'm trying to get at is when you started getting that media attention, did that fuel you to do something crazier? Because the RX-7 was pretty fucking batshit crazy.
Yeah.
But then the Rolls-Royce came around. And that was, I would say that they're pretty kind of on par with each other. I don't think one kind of overshadows the other. I think maybe there was a different message.
Yeah. I mean, I've thought about it a lot. I guess the media attention really, a lot of that, it made me think like, oh, well, now I have an audience. Like, what do I say to these people that are kind of paying attention now? What do I use this thing for? Like, gosh, I guess there's this constant struggle of how do you, and this, I recall this being a problem even when I started building it. There's a lot of weird things about the Trolls. Mm-hmm. Oh God, I don't want to call it that. There are a lot of weird things about the Rolls-Royce.
Call it what it is. The Rolls-Royce.
Rolls-Royce. I don't want
It was given that title.
Don't make me. There's a lot of weird things about building that. So I guess to preface the Rolls, because I have to preface it with this, the guy who bought the RX-7, this guy named John Pound, who's a venture capitalist up in the Bay Area.
A venture capitalist bought your RX.
Venture capitalist, yes. Really fascinating. Really genius guy. Fascinating character. Invested in a lot of cool company. I'm sure I'm sure I can say his name. Like, he's not like hiding in the shadows. I think he used to be a professor or something. Just said one of the most, when he spoke, you're just like, this man is intelligent.
Sure.
Anyway, so he bought that for and he mailed me a check for $9,500. He didn't give a shit. He's like, yeah.
Well, he's a venture capitalist.
Yeah, like that. That was mind blowing to me though. I've never seen anyone do something like that with cars. I've never seen anyone be like personal net worth. That's such a small chunk of your net worth that you can just mail the check and be like, yeah, drive it up to me when you can.
Right. It's like you walking down the street and going, ooh, a penny.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, truly, absolutely. And so when I drove it up to him and I was talking to him a bunch, and he says, oh yeah, we should have the Corbin Goodwin. We'll build your brand. I'll give you some money to build this Rolls with. How much do you think you'll need? You can build it. Because I pitched him the idea for the Rolls. I don't know how I came up with it exactly at that point. I think I was just kind of like, well, I mean, I have the story of how I thought of like the Rolls kind of, but it's honestly not that interesting. I just saw one. I saw one on the street delivering pizza, and I looked under it, and I started just like iterating like ideas.
A Rolls-Royce delivering pizza.
Yeah. I saw one while I was delivering pizza. I was in the MR2. I jumped out of my
pizza.
MR2 and checked the suspension design because I'm like, oh, what suspension do these use? Are these like as bad as I think they are? And they're not. They're actually pretty good. I'm like, oh, one of these could be like a good car. Like it can do stuff. And then I kind of just went from there.
Okay.
So I pitched him the thing. He's like, yeah, we'll give you money. And that fell through. So it got real weird. So I kind of lost my way halfway through that car, to be honest. I was like, oh, I'll do a drift car because the drifting Rolls would be really rad. And then the scope of that project kind of hit me, and I'm like, that's going to be really hard.
Right.
That's like, and that would have been possible with the resources I thought I would have had. If that money that he'd promised me had come through, like, yeah, I could have done a drift Rolls, sure. But without that, and without knowing how much money I would have, I had to think of something else. So I guess at that point, I was getting more kind of political by the day, as one does in their mid-20s, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah, you start, I mean, if you're not there already, I was like, oh, look at these kids that care about politics. That's interesting. Like, here I am in my privileged bubble, not having to give a shit. Like starting to be like, oh, wait a minute. My existence, there's caveats here. There's things going on. And so I'm like, well, what a perfect platform, this like symbol rich, this connotation rich car that I have, like, because the whole point of the drift Rolls, it's playing on that same base. It's this idea of, this luxury boat. And of course, that's the interesting, it means different things to different people. Some people it's a status symbol, some people just some old piece of shit, like,
sure.
From the 70s. And so I said, well, what if we can take this and like try to play it some politically, like somewhere between an art car and, like a political art piece, which is a little ambitious considering I don't, I'm not an artist, I guess, or, that's a lot for me to just like jump in and be like, yeah, sure, I'll like play on the British heritage and talk about like colonialism in a car.
Sure.
And there are a lot of colonial references on that car that aren't really discussed. Even the Vehicle Virgins episode I did with Parker, I got to some of them, but not all of them. Like, there's 1/5 of the wheels are gold. If you look, there's like a gold stripe on the wheel. And that's a reference to the Quinto Real, the golden fifth that you paid to the Spanish crown, the conquistadors. So like all over the car.
We're getting really, really deep with this car.
Yeah, no, I mean, there was a lot of depth. I mean, not a lot, but
there's a lot more depth than there would be traditionally with any kind of build.
Yeah, precisely. So I think the weird thing about the Roll, I'm kind of like flying over the place with this, but I mean, I think kind of the end result with that car, this kind of like, I went this way, I went that way. I thought I could do stuff, and then I was like, no, I can't do this. I was just kind of going with it. And I remember I was talking to this guy in Switzerland about it, and we were like standing in his flat in Basel, and I'm like, oh my god, that sounds so pretentious. So I swear I'm not this guy who's like wears cool designer shades and goes to Switzerland. Like, I just happened to be there. I was riding around Europe, amazing opportunity because people like me, which is fucking I'm disappointing them so badly. I took GoPro footage, I still have to make an edit, but yeah, all these cool people are like, hey man, stay with me. And anyway, opportunity of a lifetime. So I just happened to be in a flat in Basel in Switzerland. Okay, that's cool. And I was talking to him like, yeah man, I don't know. This car, it's like, it's not right. Like, it doesn't feel right the way I have it. Like, it doesn't intrigue me. I don't think it's compelling. So then I went back and it kind of ended up in this weird spot where if you explain it or kind of give it to someone who maybe knows these things, like the Golden Fifth, or like someone interested in art and history, like they might find it interesting. Or if you give it to a car person, they might find it interesting. But maybe it's not really that interesting to either of them. It just kind of sits halfway.
Yeah, maybe.
So
I mean, you're certainly putting that into a very narrow niche.
Yeah, it's strange. But in the end, like, what am I going to do is just keep iterating it forever, hoping to find the like magic bullet to like reach the mass of people that'll be like, wow, Corbin, you're a genius. It's like, no, you got to go do it and just try to make it interesting as possible. And I think I did. And it was fun to drive, and it was, you could see it a few ways, but I
think you did a pretty interesting job.
Yeah. I guess I wish the Jay Leno thing I said, if that had been the YouTube episode, I could have delved more into that. I guess I did on the Vehicle Virgins. If anyone wants to see that, Parker did a show, did a film session with that thing.
Sure.
So
what else are we missing with that car? What other political statements?
There was Memento Mori on the intercooler piping, which is a reference to, I believe, the Roman Empire's statement that they said to their army. Well, from what I understand, actually, it's something they said after big, expensive feasts they had. Memento Mori, which is remember you're going to die, basically. I think remember death, literally. And so I'm like, oh, okay, there's a cool Empire reference. And it just seemed kind of, I don't know, that was as close as I get to just like, oh, fuck it, I'll just put some cool like text on the intercooler. But I'm like, well, if it's going to be cool text on the intercooler piping, it's got to have some like meaning.
Sure.
There were the imperialist hit flags on the side of all the countries that Britain had done like kind of the most damage in. I mean, it's tough because they pretty much like, colonized the whole fucking world at some point.
Pretty much.
Yeah, and it's kind of beating a dead horse to be like, oh, look, the UK is so bad, they colonized everyone. Like, yeah, we know that. And there's many more qualified people than me to speak about that. But I just kind of went and I'm like, okay, what are the most damaged countries by the UK? And so, of course, those are the flags I put on the side. And it's interesting. What's really interesting is in the YouTube comments, you'll get some guy who's like, oh, I'm from insert country. That's awesome, dude. I see the flag. And I'm like, that's okay.
That's
like,
great. Yeah. I think you're missing the point a little bit, but that's great.
I don't think you know why I put that there.
Sure.
They even had a gas station actually down here once. Like I went to the Chesborough station or whatever, like down the street from where, and then, I think the gas attendant, I think he looked like he was Sikh and he's like, oh yeah, cool Indian flag. And I'm like,
right. Sure.
Ooh,
yeah. That thing.
So you had the wheels, the flags, the intercooler, God Save the EU. And that was truly ambiguous. I didn't have one. I think it's fascinating how many ways you can interpret that, actually. I heard so many people get offended at that just because they assumed some interpretation.
Well, what's your interpretation?
I don't even really want to put one out there. I mean, gosh, when I put it on there, I think, okay, mine, fine. I'll give the artist's interpretation. It was very much a post-Brexit, it was making fun of the UK. God save the Queen, God save the EU.
Sure.
British hubris at thinking that they could, that they were special and needed to pull out, and that their country was somehow more affected by whatever was plaguing the European continent, and that they were somehow, I don't know, it seemed like a moment of nationalism, the same that you see in the US. It felt the same to me at the time. And I think, of course, you would find many links. So I'm like, all right, like, listen, you Brits, you think you're so cool? I don't know. No, it wasn't really that, but I'm just like, oh boy, like, so that was as close to a barb at the UK as I'm going to get. But I just don't think it's any that interesting to stick it in that box and be like, that's what it is. There was a guy at a car show who said, God save the Estados Unidos. And I'm like, holy shit, bro. Didn't even think of that.
Was it an easy target because it's a Rolls-Royce and that's the status of wealth, and it's the UK? It's kind of hard to find a Dutch car. It's also kind of hard to find a French car. Is that why? I mean, I think your intersection there of, one of the most colonizing nations, and of course, UK. I mean, what's also really fascinating, this is like, we're getting like full, like, that meme where there's like an iceberg and as you go down the iceberg, people get more haggard? I don't.
You don't know that meme? Oh, you gotta look. I think you would really appreciate it.
I need to reacquaint myself with the internet, apparently.
Corbin Goodwin meme connoisseur. So there's a thing and he goes down the iceberg. So basically we're getting like to the very bottom of the iceberg right now. That period in Rolls-Royce history, that intersectional, the silver shadow, was very much the demarcation point between the old money Rolls-Royces, the silver clouds, and kind of the landed gentry Rolls-Royces, and the nouveau riche, like, hey, look, I'm doing pretty well at my Wall Street firm, so I bought a Rolls-Royce.
What year was that car?
79.
79, okay.
So
that makes sense.
It was the end of that. So, and by that time, I think you had pretty well transitioned into like the yuppie nouveau riche thing.
Right.
But so that's also a fascinating component of that, is like, it's not really the Britain of old conquering Britain that it's representing, nor is it the big baller, like, yeah, we've joined the Western world entirely in our like,
sure,
or whatever. We've entirely like become the conglomerate of Western civilization thing. It was like some weird in between ideal of the UK. So,
makes sense.
Yeah, I don't remember how that tied in, but
I didn't think that I was going to say makes sense, but it does. It makes sense.
So anyway, I mean, so if you want to throw that, so right, actually, I guess as far as easy target goes, I mean, it's more of a, I don't know, it's not supposed to be like, hey, look, the UK, they were bad back in the day. It's more like, oh, like, how does this country reconcile this? How does this resurgence in nationalism jive with people who have like caused so much misery in the world? Like, I think it's something you see in Germany today a lot too, is this kind of resurgence of like, well, why should we feel bad? One of the guys I met on my trip, actually, a car guy, very fascinating. We looked at a BMW in Germany, and looking at Craigslist cars in Germany feels exactly the same as looking at Craigslist cars in the US. Who knew? Who knew? Yeah, he was a car guy, and yeah, it was fascinating. And he's clearly on more of the nationalist side. Yeah, and I mean, not to deviate this podcast too much, but right, there is this sentiment there that's growing, and it's, the loop is closing again of like, oh, look at these people did bad stuff, but why should we feel bad for it? And I think you see that in the UK, you see that in Germany, and maybe you don't really see that here because we've never really acknowledged our like genocide / murdering spree / imperialism in the same way.
Did you ever figure out what that car meant?
I don't know if I did. I don't know if you can just corral it into one thing. I don't know if you can. How can you summarize? I mean, I've just spent like how long? Like a half hour trying to like talk about it. I just don't know if you can. I don't know what. I mean, it's a political statement. It's a hot rod. It's like an art piece. I mean, a lot of the piping over the car was very consciously like a deconstructionist thing, like deconstructionist architecture. I like architecture enough to like pretend I know something about it, and I'm just like, oh, that's cool though. Like no one does deconstructionist cars. Originally, the exhaust was going to go over the windshield actually, and over the roof and like to the back of the car, and I was going to use it to fill the low pressure zone behind the car actually, or the high pressure zone or whatever. I don't remember. I had some aerodynamic inkling at the time, not much, but I'm like, oh, what if you could shoot exhaust back there? And I was doing like flow volume calculations to try and find out if it would do anything aerodynamically. I mean, probably completely in vain, knowing what I know now about aerodynamics, but the thought was there.
Sure.
Anyway, but yeah, I'm like, oh yeah, what if you put all the pipes on the outside? It's easy. It's easy. So that's, you have to have some kind of like methodology. It's the easiest way to do it, which worked pretty well for the RX-7. And then B, it's got cool artistic value. And like C, it's got cool just like aesthetic value or whatever. Like it's just like, oh, that's weird and different and kind of fun. Anyway, I'm like rambling about it, but yeah,
you're not rambling. You're telling me about it, which is important.
Yeah, you can't pigeonhole it. I think that's the conclusion.
Fair enough.
You can just look at it a few different ways, and I mean, I guess here we go. Here's the summary on this car.
Okay, hit me.
I'm trying to bring something new to hot rodding. What do you do? What do you do to an art form or whatever that's a sculptural form that's been around for 50 years? That's possibly the most hubris I've had all night. It's like me, okay, some random dude, he's gonna like change hot rodding. But I mean, I think arguably the RX-7, like, with the ripple, there were ripples of that car that I think propagated out everywhere just a little bit. Yeah, and so what do you bring to something? Like the Chip Fooses of the world with $1 million and 1 million hours of manpower said they make the same old shit, dude. I mean, it's great. It's high quality stuff. It's beautiful.
It's different versions of the same shit.
But
I get it.
It's the same thing, recycled. I mean, as I said, rat rods just reference themselves over and over, and kind of, I don't see the point. I don't see what they're trying to do with those. It's like, and I love them. It sounds like I'm like hate everything. I really don't. It's all really cool. But I'm like, but what do you bring that's neither this nor that, nor anything else?
Corbin, this has been enlightening, I think is the word for me.
It's been something.
It's been something, for sure. I knew this was going to be an interesting conversation before you came in, because obviously your work reflects that. You're an interesting guy. I want people to know more about you. You have a great online presence. People can go online and go to Jalopnik and read about your cars. But I think it's important that people follow you in your journey, because you sounds like you're just kind of getting started. So do everyone a favor and tell people where to find you.
Thank you for the kind words. You can find me, just Facebook me, Corbin Goodwin. I'll add you. Don't post much there, but there's a lot of pictures and whatever. And if you want to talk to me, that's probably the easiest way. That or Instagram is Corbin.Goodwin, I think, or _Goodwin. Same thing. Find me at my name. kind of whatever cool car stuff I do, I tend to post up there. I have some pretty great stories. I'm all about my Insta stories. I have a YouTube channel. You can find me. If you just Google me, I come up plenty of places. Yeah, YouTube. I think that's about the extent of it. You'll see stuff. Oh, actually, if you're interested in racing cars at all, go check out the Formula SAE, the Northridge FSAE page, which is Matador Motorsports.
Very cool.
And if you're anywhere near me, man, come by the shop. We'll show you the car. We can hang out. It's
that
cool.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
That sounds great. Is that an invitation for me, or
Absolutely.
is that an invitation for all of the listeners?
For anyone, man. If you're anywhere near Northridge and you want to come see us building a small race car, please do.
That sounds fantastic. I think I might take you up on that offer.
Please do.
The Road Stories podcast is recorded, mixed, and produced by Michael Sundarovich. Original music is provided by Clarence in the Road Stories project. You can find more music by Clarence by going to soundcloud.com/Clarence Los Angeles. If you like this podcast, please leave us a review. It helps the show greatly.